I'll tell you a story about when I was in high school, and this is kind of how it works. We're hanging about with a bunch of people. And I remember this one guy who I was friends with, and they were all teasing, you get these little couples when you're younger, and they're like, oh, you too, blah, blah, blah. And I remember sitting in the room when he looked at her and said, I can't date her. I couldn't take her home. And I looked over at him, and I just sat there quietly listening. And he said, I was always taught those kind are good to have fun with, but they're not something you take home to your family. The amount of comments like that throughout the years that you get, the belittling, the sexualization of Indigenous females. My mother and myself were kidnapped as a young child from a man who was a church-going man. Everybody believed that he was this great person. When my grandparents and my family and Namarin court workers called the police to report us missing and said that they suspected he had us because there was previous incidences where he was stalking me at the school. He'd had guys stalking me. Multiple things had already happened. So my family pretty much knew who had taken us. They called him on the phone to ask if he had seen us. Oh, Anna must have forgot to tell everybody she was taking Kristi on vacation to Buffalo, New York. My mom worked, she never booked the day off, nothing, but because she was an Indigenous female, we just went on a vacation without telling anybody. It was on day 9 that a new officer on the case decided that they should go to his house and question him instead of calling him. And found us. My mother was a security guard at the courthouse when this happened. And I look at that. My grandmother was a court worker. My mom was a security guard at that time. And if it can happen to my family, that happens continually. Over and over and over. Out west, you go out there, you get off the Greyhound bus, you have bulletin boards like this. And it's nothing but Indigenous children and women missing. I'm from an Indigenous tribe here in Canada that's actually an American tribal nation. We had bought land here in Canada. We're landowners. But when they erected Indian Act of Canada, any Indigenous person in Canada at that time fell under Indian Act of Canada. Doesn't matter where you came from. They were taking children as young as 3 years old away from their families. And then they wouldn't be released until they were legal to adults. They spent all that time being taught to be, quote unquote, good little Catholic Christian children. That was the whole point of it. Haudenosaunee and Inuit children were the first ones placed in Mohawk Institute, which is the first ever erected residential school in Canada. Every school across Canada and the US was modeled off of that school. My first Canadian-born family member was taken to that school, all the way down. We have a family member on the death rolls there. A lot of people think it's hundreds of years ago. And in some communities, residential schools are still running to this day. There are still laws in place that state that people in education can put their hands on our children. And of course, our parents don't know what to do because they were raised in this system. The system that they were nothing better than just somebody's kicking horse, work mule, conforming to their Christian and Catholic values, erasing everything that these people knew. For 150,000 children How do you make restitution when nobody wants to even talk about it in a room? I know children who, from the age of 12 to 17, have been 20-something foster homes. Abusive home after abusive home after abusive home. But see, that's the problem, is when they report it, they're the problem. I was scared to death to call the police when my son was sexually abused. Because I knew of all the ways they were going to try and make it my fault as an Indigenous mother. Because that's exactly what I seen them do to my mother. Because when we were first found, she went through 5 days of interrogation. My mom left that silenced. It was almost like a rule in our home. We never spoke about it. It took forever for my younger brother to even know that this had happened. And so when you see that intergenerational trauma head on, knowing what I seen my mother go through, looking on this side and there's my mother, and then looking at this side and there's my son. And the damage that had just been repeatedly happened. And again, my family was just one. And honestly, nothing really different or special about it, considering you could probably get 20,000 of me sitting here. My community alone is a community that doesn't have water. There's a community next to us that doesn't have a school. We're 25 minutes out of a city center. So imagine the impact of trauma on top of just trying to survive every day here because of the Indian Act of Canada. Because we didn't conform. But now we have so many people that are lost. And perpetuating these abuses, because when you're taken from 3 years old to adulthood and that's all you know, how do you change that? How do you know any different? So a lot of our sexual abuse survivors, especially when it comes from the church, the government, Child Welfare Act, all of that still feel like there's nothing in the world we can do that's gonna wake Canada up to listen. A lot of Indigenous females are pretty, they're the matriarchs of the family. But the problem is they carry so much trauma that they've never been allowed to appropriately deal with, be able to stand in a safe space and actually speak their truth. So a lot of it is they have to be these strong people. And in turn, that's what they teach their children. But the problem with that is silence isn't getting us anywhere. Because these patterns are just repeating and repeating and repeating. And we are on a new generation of aunties and uncles that can stand up and can use our voices. Nothing like Canada's ever seen before. We know how important it is for our children to feel loved and supported, feel human, and let them know that, for all these years, there's been this whole system. But now we're gonna use our voice to take it back, to remind these people that our children, our families, are beautiful. And they're not second class. And our children are in second class. And that Indigenous families have the right to their own healing in the ways that they know truly heal our children and families. And that's through language, that's through ceremonies. Those are the connections. My part with Survivors Council is always bringing the Indigenous voice to the table for all the families, for all the children, for all the survivors, and just reminding people, I got a ton of them behind me. And every one of them has a right to sit at this table. And I'm hoping with showing the youth things like that, you know what? I'm hoping in a couple of years, we're gonna be doing Survivor Council things. We're gonna have a bunch of Indigenous people sitting there, sharing their voice, sharing ideas. But there has to be people like me who barge in, be loud, and make that space first.